And welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. And thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. If you are listening live, and thank you so much for already jumping on. If you are listening on the replay, if you could hashtag replay wherever you're watching us at, we would so appreciate that. Wherever you are joining us, if you could share this video, we would so appreciate it so we can get more eyes and more ears on this awesome content we're about to share. We have had over 400 women grace the Her Version podcast stage, and we're super excited to have another one coming in. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Cassie Spencer. Did I get that right?
Yep, you did.
Oh my gosh, all that drama. Cassie Spencer. Cassie is a career coach and podcast host with a background in higher education. She has worked in career and professional development offices on college campuses, in addition to supporting clients through her private career coaching practice, helping others make their next career move at the core of the work that Cassie does. Welcome, lady. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so excited to be here.
Please tell me that I'm not the only person that flip-flops that.
Oh, you are one of a million. I tell my parents all the time that I love my name a lot, but it is the worst over the phone or via like any sort of virtual platform. It just can never, it's never right. So,
you know what's so funny is my name is Sabrina, but people call me all the time Samantha.
Oh, interesting.
Which isn't even remotely. I'm sorry, but like barely.
Yeah. That's, I would have guessed something else. Like,
but I answer to both. Like, I'm just so used to it. It's been happening since I was little, and it's just one of the. So I'm sure you do too, right? You just
I mean, same thing. It's Cassie, Casey, Kathy. They're like, I'll respond.
Responding to the ka.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. You know, part of doing these shows is the guest. I mean, if there wasn't a guest, then there wouldn't be a show. So I so appreciate women like you who understand how important it is to step up, share some knowledge, share some value, share some stories, and to really inspire, to really help individuals who are in a dark spot, who are struggling, who are dealing with stuff. It could be career, could be money, could be relationships, could be their health, and really allow people to recognize, number one, they're not alone. And number two, there is a way out. So I so appreciate you being here and taking some time out of your day to relax with us and share some goodies. So one of the things that I love to open up with is stories, journeys, struggles, challenges, things that you've gone through in your life that you're, that you'd love to share, that you think are inspiring. And then let us know what you learned. So what's something you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. I, first of all, just love the premise of this show, and I'm so excited to be here, which I'll say again and again, I'm sure. But it only seems natural, kind of given the work that I do and my background, to incorporate some of my own career story in this. As a career coach, it's just kind of my natural lane. So I think a good starting point is looking to how kind of my career has changed, and especially in the last 2 years. And kind of as it's March, I'm seeing all the videos right now of people acknowledging that it was about 3 years ago that kind of the world shifted drastically, and we kind of went into that first like lockdown and isolation period. And that was a really big shift for me. I was living alone in upstate New York at the time. I was working full time at a job that I was going into the office every day. I was working on a college campus. And throughout kind of that period of time where we weren't really going places and we weren't doing anything and we were figuring out how to work remotely, which now this all just feels so second nature to us. But as that was a challenging time for everyone, that it was a really challenging time for me. And as someone who loves to be on the go and loves to travel and be around people, it was definitely very challenging as an individual, but also from that career perspective and from a life perspective, I just really started to sit with myself and acknowledge what was working and what wasn't. And there was a lot of things that weren't working. And I started to really kind of wrestle with the fact that I had the things I thought I wanted. Things were fine. I was doing what I thought I should be doing. But I didn't want things to be like, quote unquote, fine anymore. And so throughout that process, and probably a year and a half, it wasn't until halfway through 2021 that I then started to make some significant changes. And that included moving to a different state, relocating, quitting my job, starting a business and starting a podcast and quitting a bunch of other things along the way, and making a bunch of changes in that way. But that has led me to where I am now, and all the wonderful things that you introduced me by saying that I'm doing. So I think that that is just really a story, especially more recently, that I think I kind of bet on myself and I said, I don't need to be doing the things that everyone told me I should be doing, and I can forge my own path. And again, especially as someone who spends hours and hours every day talking with people about their careers and their goals and all of that. It was a little bit of a wake up call to like force myself to have those conversations, both with myself and with other coaches as well.
For sure. Wow, that's awesome. I know that there's so many individuals, men and women, who are confronted with this, or confronted with pivots and changes, and needing to step up, needing to step down, whatever it is. Regarding your journey, what do you think were the steps that you took to kind of mentally prepare or mentally pivot into this new life, these changes? What did you have to do? Did you read? Did you do yoga? Did you talk to your mom? Like, what did you do to okay the pivot? Because so many times people are confronted and they don't know how to do it. So they a lot of times fall apart, right? We get on medication, we go into depression, anxiety, we never leave our room, or just refuse to change, just refuse, just don't know
Yeah.
how to.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, multiple things that factored into this. I'll never forget that it was maybe 2 months in, a month and a half into kind of things initially like locking down when people really were doing nothing at the beginning of the pandemic there. I just happened to be on the phone with my dad one day, and he could very quickly tell, like, I was not in a good spot. And he was like, "Hey, Cass, when was the last time you've gone outside? Like, have you even been outside recently?" And I stood there in my apartment being like, "Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know when the last time was that I physically stepped outside. Like, maybe it was a week and a half ago. When was the last time I got groceries? Like, I had no concept of that." And that was a really big wake up call for me of like, that's not who I am. That's not how I operate. And like, even just that gentle reminder, and he was very gentle about it, but he was like, you can go for a walk, like you can go do that. And that I think was one of the first kind of changing points for me, that I then very quickly got into the habit of like, I woke up every day and I walked outside for 20 minutes. I just went for a lap around the apartment complex I was living in, came back inside, and then started the work day. And got on the computer and did what I needed to do. But that was one of the first things where then I was able to kind of come out of that like intense isolation that I was in, and at least start to recognize like, okay, getting outside every day is a foundational thing. Like, I need to be doing this. And then with that, some other like really small habits were the starting point for me. It always feels so cliche to be like, I go for a walk every day and I like drink a gallon of water every day, but they are just such foundational items for me that to this day, those are things that I do. And I know if I'm like, didn't get enough water in today, it's like by day 2 of that, I'm like, all right, we need to circle back, and I live in New England, so the weather can be questionable. Like today, it's just endless snow. And it's like, okay, well, maybe one day we'll bypass the walk because it's cold and windy and gross out. But like tomorrow, you better believe I have to be outside for at least a little bit to kind of like maintain that consistency and to, just kind of keep that foundational element of like my overall wellness. So those were some of the like early foundational things. Throughout the process, I definitely am a big reader of all like self-help books, career-related books, partially because of the work that I do, but also just a general interest area. So that was helpful. Podcasts are huge to me. I listen to them all the time. And so some of those kind of sparked some additional just like self-care and overall wellness practices that I still abide by. And I think one of the biggest things is that as I started to really recognize like the way in which I'm living my life and how I'm working and operating in the world is not what I want. And that kind of stance of being like, it's fine, but I don't want things to just be fine, was a really big eye opener for me. And that was, I was really lucky to have a mentor at that time and someone that I still speak with regularly now, who asked me one day, I was sitting in my apartment in upstate New York, and she said, if everything's the same a year from now, you're sitting at this desk in your living room, in this apartment in New York, like same job, everything in your life is the same. How are you going to feel? And that question was such a game changer for me, where I knew instantly, like probably before she even got that whole question out, I was like, nope, this is fine and I don't want fine. And now I need to start really making some changes and really evaluating like what will make this not just quote unquote fine. And that's been something too that has continued to be a question I come back to. Like even now, I'm a year into running my own business and almost a year into having my own podcast and some of these other things that have brought so much joy and happiness and like have gotten me, past that point of like just fine. But it's a question I come back to. I'm like, okay, if in this moment right now, today, a year from now, I'm doing this same thing, how is that going to make me feel? And then what does that prompt me to change? What needs to shift and change from there? So I think it's a continuous evolution. And for me, that question has just been a really nice standard to come back to help me make some of those decisions.
That's awesome. What prompted you to get into coaching?
Great question. So I think unlike a lot of career coaches, I came into career coaching very early. A lot of career coaches that I know and that I've worked with typically work in industry for a little while, work in HR or in another area, and then kind of transition into career coaching. I was an undergrad student and I was not sure what I wanted to do. I was kind of going through that typical like college student process of not knowing and changing my major a bunch of times and all of that. And I feel like I got kind of lucky in the sense that I signed up to take a technical writing class. I'd always been a good writer. I'd always enjoyed writing. I was an English major for a little while. And so because of that, I took this technical writing class. And it was through that class that the professor had someone from the Career Center come in, and we initially learned how to properly write a resume and a cover letter. We started LinkedIn profiles. So pretty early into the LinkedIn game. And I just really had a like natural knack for it. I liked learning that and I liked doing that. And because of that class, I then started writing my friends' resumes and cover letters and helping them job search, but also started meeting with a career coach because of that class. And was kind of going through that typical career exploration process. And through one of those meetings, the career coach and I were talking about different options for me as I approached graduation. And I more or less had kind of this light bulb moment. It always feels a little surreal to think back about it, but the career coach was talking about alternate programs, like gap year types of opportunities for me because I was still feeling really uncertain. And it just kind of clicked. And I was like, wait a second, you get paid to do this. And they were like, yep, I do. And I was like, okay, but like, how did you get paid to do this? How do you do this? And so then that sparked this path. And they kind of walked me through the steps of like, okay, go to grad school and here's what you need to do. And the typical career path means that you're working on college campuses and all of that. And I thought that sounds pretty great that I can do that. And so I started on that path, and that was really the plan. Like the whole reason that I went to graduate school was to become a career coach. Whereas a lot of people who go through a similar program that I went through are looking at different areas of higher education and student affairs and that type of thing. I was all in on career development from the beginning and like stuck through that path throughout grad school and then into my career ever since.
How do you feel about the thought process of being in a career that you enjoy versus being a career that pays you what you need to pay in order to have the lifestyle that you want?
Great question. And I think for me, this really boils down to the individual and what's important to them. Some people are incredibly money motivated, and that is what matters to them. They want the paycheck that's going to provide the lifestyle that they want and everything else that comes with that. And the tasks, responsibilities, work to get that paycheck matters less to them. For some people, though, the idea of like staring at a spreadsheet all day or, working in different environments and that type of thing provides them with no fulfillment or sounds miserable to them. And like the paycheck would almost never be worth it. So I think in regards to that, there is no right answer, which is hard. But that also means that as an individual and with a lot of the people that I work with and just in general, knowing what's important to you really matters. And I think knowing what you value and what motivates you can be a really nice starting point to then make some decisions about either the career paths that you go into, the jobs you take, the companies you work for, and that type of thing. Because that will lead you to then a better outcome based on those values.
Yeah. When it comes to, at least from my own story, when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's pretty easy to pivot. As you start building a community, as you start networking, as you start coaching and recognizing who you appreciate coaching, what you don't appreciate coaching, you're able to micro niche down as you're coaching to really hone in on what specifically you want to be working on. I feel like it's a little different with careers and with jobs because you spend a whole lot of time going to school, for instance, and then jumping into something, and then maybe a year or two in recognizing that you don't really even like that thing, and then having to pivot. What are your thoughts as far as pivoting in the same niche? I mean, into two different niches.
Yeah, I think there definitely are easier like lanes to pivot in and out of, like through the lens of entrepreneurship, because you are more or less you're your own boss, you're making the decisions. And so if you wake up one day and you're like, I want to focus on this, there's of course always other people or things to answer to depending on your life circumstances, but you can make that decision and you can pivot. If you're in more of that traditional 9-to-5 corporate job and that type of thing, there can sometimes be more challenges with making that pivot. But I think the offset of that and like the pros and cons of each world, entrepreneurship versus like corporate or 9-to-5, is that you can maybe make that change a little bit slower, but with a lot more stability. Or you can make that pivot based on the specific like tasks and projects that you're saying yes to and all of that, or the way in which you're doing your work versus the actual task. So I'll give an example because I feel like that's a little like out there broad, but while I was working a full-time 9-to-5 job on a college campus, I was career coaching, more or less the same type of thing that I do now. But I found that in that role, I was doing things that were really kind of draining my energy, and just some of the responsibilities, tasks, expectations, because of the environment that I was in, were then causing me to like reach that burnout, not be interested in what I was doing, and that type of thing. And so one way that I started to make a pivot in there was by saying yes to projects that were more creative, that gave me a little bit more freedom, that allowed me to do different things, like starting to work on more of our social media presence and doing live interviews like this with alumni and that type of thing. And don't get me wrong, I was lucky that I was in a situation where I had a supervisor who just like said yes to a lot of the things that I suggested. But I think that that's a good example of where I started to make some of those shifts. And so then even if I had stayed in that like 9-to-5 or in a more corporate setting, I could have then chosen that next job based on that. Like, what next position is going to provide me with those opportunities, versus then making the shift to entrepreneurship. So I do think there's pros and cons to each. I do think, kind of as a foundational belief, like there are always ways to pivot and always ways to focus on different skill sets and to help them transfer between activities. And in the same way that you may pivot a business from that entrepreneurship side of things, like in most cases, you're not just saying like, okay, poof, like I'm shifting my whole thing over here, right? It's a little bit more of a strategic and a steady process to make that pivot as you're recognizing like what you like about coaching, what you don't like, and what you have capacity for, and those types of things. It can be very similar in that corporate setting where you're making decisions about what you say yes to and what you say no to, what additional projects you take on, or the way in which you're doing your work. And then also using that information to then make the next decision, either in how your role is going to change at that current company, or in what companies' roles and capacities you're going to move on to in that next position.
As far as what is that called when you move up, like up the ladder?
Like a promotion?
Yeah. How long should somebody stay in a career before they start looking at or asking for promotions?
So this will really depend on both the industry that you're working in, but also the specific company that you're working in. Some industries and companies have very standard processes for promotions, that you work for 2 years, let's say, at this role. Then if you meet these metrics, you can promote to this role. You stay there for 2 to 4 years. If you meet these metrics, then you move up to this role. So some companies and industries just have really kind of standard ladders, essentially, to climb up. Other industries just don't operate that way. Other companies don't operate that way, depending on the size of them and all of that too. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, of knowing your industry standards, knowing kind of how the company that you're either working for or that you're interested in working for operates can be helpful. Definitely talking to people who have worked in that company before. Or I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, like look up people on LinkedIn, see their career trajectory. If you're looking at a company and you're noticing that every person who works there, they've been in that same role for 4, 5, 7, 10 years, and they're not moving up, they're not getting promoted at that company, I think that can be pretty eye-opening. Versus if you're looking at employees of another company and you're seeing pretty consistently every 2 to 4 years or something, people are moving up, that can be eye-opening. So having that baseline information, I think, is important, and knowing what the standards are. I think it's also important to know, like, is that something that you want? A lot of times, like, yes, a promotion comes with more money, and that is immediately tempting to people. But that can also mean that it's coming with other responsibilities, other tasks and work and that type of thing. And so determining if that's something you want. I know in industries I've been in, a lot of promotions are tied to then supervision responsibilities and other things like that. And so if someone doesn't want to supervise a team, if that's not a skill set that they feel they have, or that's just not work that they want to do, that then hinders their ability to move up in an organization. And so, I watched people who had been at a company much longer than I had, but they didn't want to supervise people, and I did. And so that kind of changed how and when I was promoted versus them, and vice versa. So I think that's also an important thing to keep in mind. Like, society has kind of told us that, like, the goal is to move up the ladder, right? And if that's your goal, if that motivates you, amazing. But also, if it's not, I think this kind of comes back to that original question about, like, doing a job that allows you to live your lifestyle, or doing something that you're passionate about and fulfilling. And you can have both, but you can also then make decisions about things like promotions based on what's important to you and how kind of all of those pieces are working together.
Definitely. LinkedIn right now is really coming to the forefront as far as job searches, as far as being an online resume. What are your thought processes as far as individuals getting onto LinkedIn and really honing in on what that looks like for future employees to be looking at?
I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think that it is just such a wealth of information, and it gives us all, anyone who has a profile, it gives us access to so much information that we didn't previously have. And so, if you don't have one, I recommend getting a profile and getting it started. I won't lie to you, like, getting your profile up and running per se, filling out the profile and starting to build out your connections, probably not the most fun. It takes a little bit of time, but the payoff to having that, I do think, is worth it. And I also feel like having a LinkedIn profile, having your profile built out, it's something that, like, a year from now, you won't regret having one. But a year from now, you will regret having not started one, type of thing. So if you're in that spot, like, it's okay to not have, this beautiful profile built out, but definitely get it started. Future you will thank you for that. So that's my little pitch there. But I think LinkedIn is just such a powerful tool from that information gathering standpoint, being able to see, like, how have other people done it? How have they made those pivots between industries, between entrepreneurship and corporate America? How have they moved up at a certain company or moved around and that type of thing? When did they do that? What does their job even look like? I have a lot of conversations with people, especially right now in kind of their late 20s, early 30s, who have kind of been working for a little bit and kind of having now this realization of, they're like, no one ever told me that, like, a business analyst was a job, right? Or, like, what even does this do? Like, these job titles. And we're only going to continue to see a rapid change in, like, what job titles are available as our world changes and technology changes and needs for jobs change and all of that. And so LinkedIn is such a wonderful place where if there is a job title that you're like, I've never even heard of that, or what even is that thing? We can look at real humans who are doing that and read about what they're doing. And that's one of my favorite things about LinkedIn. Like, you can Google anything and find an answer, but there's just a lack of practicality to it when you're reading, like, the WikiHow page or something, telling you what a job is, versus looking at someone's actual career trajectory and how they've moved into that field. So that's one piece of it. The other thing too is that it is more or less an expectation that you have a presence on LinkedIn, and where, 10 or 12 years ago, there was a lot of talk in the news and all of that, that employers were going to look you up on social media and they were going to find your Facebook page, right? And, like, your worst photos from college on there and that type of thing, and all of that. And that is not so much the case anymore, that's happening. But there is an expectation then that you will be on LinkedIn, and that this online presence, this online resume will be there. So important to have it for that, but also important, I think, because there's just less restrictions to LinkedIn than we have on, like, a physical resume. There's some wiggle room with, like, formatting and all of that on a physical resume, but there is just more space online. On your LinkedIn profile, we can scroll through and include things that maybe don't make the cut for a resume. And so people can get a more holistic picture of what you're doing. It can also be a space where they're seeing other things that aren't maybe work related, but that you still want to showcase. And so including side projects that you're working on, or volunteer work that you've done, projects, interviews like this, and that type of thing can all kind of live in this one space, which I think is a really huge benefit of the platform as well, and kind of giving a potential employer or a potential client that holistic picture of who you are and the value that you bring.
Definitely. What would you say is the number one mistake that you see people making on LinkedIn?
The number one mistake would be not using it, is like the biggest one. For people who are actually using it, I think the number one mistake is that on LinkedIn, you have your name, and right under your name, a statement comes up. It's auto-filled by LinkedIn, and it's called your headline. And I think for people who use the platform, the number one mistake is that they don't update their headline. They let LinkedIn kind of auto-fill it with their job title instead of customizing it. And in my opinion, it's one of the most powerful pieces of the profile. In the same way that right here, you all can see our names and our websites, like it's there, you know where to find us, boom. It's a similar type of thing on LinkedIn where it's that line right under your name, and it just gives you the ability to share what you want with someone and to kind of introduce yourself to someone with the titles, words, phrases, etc. that describe you before they even click on your profile. So it can give someone, again, kind of that full picture of who you are. So that'd be my number one mistake for people who are actually using the platform.
I wonder what mine says. What does yours say?
Mine says something I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something along the lines of like career coach, helping others make their next career move, subscriber of Happenstance, podcast host, fan of lunch walks, I think is mine, not in that order. But what I hope is a nice overview, a lot of things that were in my bio that you read, a nice overview of who I am, the things I like to do, and all of that.
So the like description underneath my name, LinkedIn autofills that for people?
Yeah, so it'll autofill that typically based on either what your current job title is, or if you're a student, it may say like student at whatever university. It'll autofill that. It'll ask you if you want to update it, and a lot of people just don't update it. But you can customize that to be more specific to you.
Wow. So this little spot where I have 4 lines of description, that part is autofilled by LinkedIn. So people just have just some random thing from like all this words right here I have written down.
Yeah, so that's your headline. Yep.
Look at, there's us.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's funny that we can see ourselves on there.
Yeah,
so that's your headline. So you've customized yours to kind of give that overview of what you do and who you are. And some people, if they don't update that, it would just say like career coach at whatever company, or teacher at whatever school, student at whatever school, business analyst at Google, or something like that. But you can go in and update that and really then give people an overview of who you are and what's important to you. And you can also include some fun things in there. Like I put that I'm a fan of lunch walks. I do that almost every day. But I've worked with other people who've put really fun things in their headline too, to like add a little bit of personality to it and to showcase more of who they are than just like a job title too.
Yeah, definitely. What's your thought process as far as LinkedIn being a good place to search for jobs? Has it reached the level of like an Indeed or something of the sort, career.com? I don't know what is popular.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is definitely a good place to search for jobs. I think some of the benefits of the LinkedIn platform is that you can save specific searches. So if you're looking for a specific job title, either in a specific location or, with certain parameters, like you want it to be a remote role and entry level or senior level, those types of things, you can save those searches and it will then populate like a really nice list for you. So that can be a huge benefit. Another really nice benefit of using LinkedIn as a job search platform as well is that if there are people within your network that work at a company that you're looking at or a job that you're looking at, you can also see that. So from that networking lens, if I'm looking to apply to a job and I see that you work there, it gives me that information where I don't have to really remember, like, where does every single person that I know work and that type of thing. I can see it right through LinkedIn. And so from that perspective, you can really benefit your job search by tapping into your network and seeing who's working at companies that I'm interested in, who previously worked at those companies, and using that to your advantage to potentially get a referral, get connected with a hiring manager, to learn more about a company too. A lot of times job searching can feel like we're going in blind, like we're just applying to jobs because they sound good.
Yeah.
And then we get into those jobs or companies and you're like, this is not what I thought it was, right? And so taking some of those steps throughout the process or before to really learn about a company and to start to identify if that company or organization aligns with the things that are important to you. Is it going to allow you to have the lifestyle that you want to have, and all of that can be a big benefit of using that platform and seeing your connections along the way.
Absolutely. Very, very cool. When it comes to you and your specific coaching, who should be reaching out to you? Who do you specifically coach? What do you do?
Yeah, great question. So I primarily work with women mid 20s to mid 40s is my typical age range that I work with. And for the most part, people who are ready to make their next career move. They're ready to either make a complete career transition from one industry to another, or they're ready to make a move to their next job. Typically, that would then be kind of a step up in the career path that they've chosen. So on a very broad level, that's what I do. A little bit kind of more specific into that, I write people's resumes. I help people write cover letters, prepare for interviews. And more than anything else, I help people job search really strategically. The number one challenge I see people having, once you have the foundational elements of like a resume, a LinkedIn, a cover letter, and that type of thing, is the strategy and the planning that goes into job searching. And that's where a lot of people struggle. A lot of people struggle to maintain the motivation to job search because it can be such a kind of draining process to go through that. And so kind of being that accountability partner throughout the job search process, and being someone who can provide both the encouragement, but also then the next strategic step to help you get where you want to go, is really at the core of what I do.
Awesome. Where can people find you on social media? Is it primarily LinkedIn?
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. There's links to everywhere I am on social media via my website, careercoachcassie.com, right up there. On most social media platforms, I am at Career Coach Cassie. So definitely check me out there. I post a lot of good informative stuff on Instagram, a little bit more fun stuff on TikTok, 100% informative stuff on LinkedIn. So depending on the platform, we switch it up a little bit. But definitely check me out in those places. And then I also host a podcast called Happenstance. It's a career adjacent podcast where we tell career stories and kind of dive into the twists and turns of all of our careers. So Happenstance, the podcast, is available on Apple and Spotify.
Beautiful. What are your big dreams for your business?
Oh, great question. Big dreams for the business. I would love to scale my coaching up to be to include group coaching. I think there's a lot of value in sharing that experience of going through the job search process. So right now I work 100% one-on-one with each client, but I would love to scale up to have some group coaching. And then the other big business goal I have right now is to really grow the podcast. I love podcasting and I love telling career stories. And I would love to definitely continue to grow that and to make that more of a center point of the business that I'm working on.
Awesome. And why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? I love being part of people's career stories. I think our careers, our jobs, the work that we do, it is such a big portion of our life. And I really believe that we should be doing things that we feel good about, things that tap into our skills, strengths, passions, and all of that. And so being part of that process and helping people make that move to pull those things together and to find a career, a job, that next move that brings them that fulfillment, that happiness, or that leads them to the lifestyle that they want to leave, that brings me a lot of joy.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cassie, for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Closing thoughts. I would say definitely one of the biggest lessons I have learned throughout my own career journey, and something that I hope to pass along to others, and I think that resonates really well with your story and your audience too, is to bet on yourself. You know, I think we are all so incredibly capable of the things that we want to do, and following those passions, following those like gut yeses. I just think they'll never lead us down the wrong path. So
Definitely. Great advice there. Well, those of you that are watching live, thank you for being here. Thanks of you watching on the replay. If you could hashtag replay wherever you are watching us at, so we can send you some love. If you resonated with the goodness that was shared today, make sure you check out careercoachcassie.com. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure we all continue to rise. Thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. Reach out to me at hernation.life if you are interested in sharing your own story. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others.